I am joined by Robert Griffin III, James White, Field Yates Meanakeims.
All right, so first play we're going to look at 2nd and 2, one of the Patriots' first offensive plays.
Oh, you're muted, buddy.
Oh, come on.
There it is.
Am I back? Jesus. All right, here we
Wouldn't
go.
be a morning podcast if we just started right out of the gate.
Insane. It wouldn't be a morning podcast. Wouldn't be training camp if it wasn't for some technical difficulties here on Patriots Press Pass and Patriots Daily. I'm Mike Kadlick. He's Taylor Kyles, waking up with y'all to get you ready for the 2024 Patriots season. This is going to be our official sort of training camp preview, if you will, and we're going to go through each position group and talk about some questions we have at each group and what we're looking to get answered down at training camp starting today. A reminder, we are powered by Game Time. Head over to Game Time. Use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Those terms do apply. We got Red Sox. I don't think they have training camp tickets on Game Time, but you can go get some preseason games over there a little while because we're getting right into it starting today. So, Taylor, again, we're going to do, for those of you watching here, we're going to do kind of a half-hour quick hitter on our top training camp questions at each position before we head down to Foxborough for the day. So make sure you also follow along there with both of us on Twitter and social media and on YouTube, because then we're going to do a post-practice live from Gillette. Yeah. So a ton of coverage coming out because my Wi-Fi is going in and out.
Yeah, I was literally just typing to you, letting you know, but it's okay. We can just get right to the question.
What the hell? All right, well, let's go to quarterback. You don't
want to be seeing a lot of our
one,
faces throughout the day, so it's all right. Just like bear with us this morning. We'll get it figured out.
Yeah, this is crazy. All right, but that's okay. You have me back now?
Yeah, I got you, buddy.
All right, let's do quarterback. Number one question, Taylor, for you. What are you looking to get answered at the quarterback position this offseason, or this training camp, rather?
Yeah, can Drake May earn the starting job? That's really the biggest question. I know Gerard Mayo was like, oh, yeah, but we got to talk about Bailey Zappi and Joe Milton as well. I mean, respectfully, Gerard, you guys, that's important for you. For us out here, we want as much Drake May content as we can get. Now, at the same time, honestly, dude, I've been watching a lot more Jacoby Brissett from 2022 with the Browns. I got to watch like some of it kind of get reacquainted when he first signed, but, we've had a lot of time, so I've been digging in. It's going to be tough for Drake May to beat him because I feel like the things that Drake May struggles with, specifically like for this Alex Van Pelt offense, a lot of quick game, a lot of underneath throws, Jacoby Brissett is great at. He's also really good in tight windows. Drake May can be, but in terms of seeing what this person can do at the professional level, I feel like Jacoby Brissett was excellent with the Browns in those situations. But at the same time, Drake May's ceiling is so much higher, like the arm talent, the athleticism. Jacoby's a solid athlete, especially for a bigger guy, but even still, I think it's going to be tough for Drake to beat him out. But if he starts to kind of even out in terms of consistent accuracy, being able to run the offense, get the play calls out, all that good stuff. If he can do that, then I think we'll start to see a bit more of a gap start to, show up. But Jacoby's going to be a tough one to unseat because I still think the Pats could do pretty well with him under center as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that's the obvious question is if Drake May can actually overtake this position throughout the next couple weeks and, legitimately be their starter week one. I don't know if it's going to happen. I think they sort of have this plan in place where they don't want to stray away from it if they don't have to. But again, if it, like Mayo told us yesterday, if May goes out there and kicks butt for the next 15 days and, completely earns it, then I don't see why you wouldn't start him because you've argued it all along. And I'm starting to, it's at points I was saying like, make sure the offensive line is ready and make sure the rapport is perfect with the receivers. But at the end of the day, dude, if he's good, he's good. Just get him out there and let him rip it because, yeah, you can learn behind the scenes, but you're never going to actually get into, an NFL groove and stuff like that if you don't actually get out there and get some live reps. The one thing I sort of question about quarterback too, though, is it's the third quarterback spot. Like it doesn't, frankly, it doesn't really matter. I think it's Drake May and it's Jacoby Brissett and the rest of it, we'll see what happens. But I'm curious to see what decisions they make there. If they cut a guy throughout the middle of camp and go with 3 QBs early. If Joe Milton can show enough where, okay, we don't really need Bailey Zappi around anymore. Or if they go the route that we talked about yesterday on our show down from Foxborough, where do they really not want to throw Drake May into the fire at all? And do they keep a guy like Bailey Zappi around to be the true game day backup for a few weeks until they feel like Drake May is ready? Now, with May passing Zappi in the depth chart so early on in the offseason program, I don't think that's going to be the case. So I guess the question really becomes, how long do they keep Bailey Zappi around? Are they going to be able to get some trade? Could they trade him down the line at some point? Like, I'm kind of interested to see how that all plays out. And if Joe Milton can show that he's not just bazooka arm Joe Milton, and if he can actually make plays and, add some touch to the football and things like that. So the entire quarterback room is super interesting because it's so different than it was a year ago.
Yeah, I definitely think Bailey Zappi is interesting more in terms of whether he'll become the trade chip they probably hope he's going to be. Because, like we've mentioned in our videos before, I don't really think Joe Milton's someone you want to expose to potentially waivers of the practice squad where he can get poached. Right. So Bailey Zappi can give you something that's awesome. I just don't see him making the roster because it's hard to justify keeping 4 quarterbacks, which is probably what they'd have to do. And in terms of Drake May's timeline, just to kind of put a bow on this, because we do kind of need to hit these rapid fire.
Right.
I don't really think there is necessarily a plan. I think the plan is let's get this kid as prepared as we possibly can and let him decide the timeline, because Jacoby Brissett could start the entire year, obviously, as long as he's healthy, if they needed him to. So, and also to your point, I think that experience on the field is what's going to help Drake May. There's only so much you can learn off the field. Like, we've had players get hurt and miss a season, and then we're like, oh, how much were you able to grow, behind the scenes? And you can learn certain things, but you actually have to execute them. Because there's a lot of smart players who can't really get it done on the field. So, yeah, timeline I'm not so sure about, but I do think it's ultimately going to come down to him getting on the field and actually getting muscle memory and reps.
For sure. Yeah. All right, let's move on to running back. It's the third down back position because obviously Ramondre got paid. He's going to be, that sort of bell cow type of guy. And then you have Antonio Gibson and you have JaMycal Hasty. Now, what's interesting is the news that came down yesterday that Antonio Gibson's starting on the NFI list. So he's not going to be out there today. I don't know how long. We don't know what's going on with him. If it's an illness, if it's an injury, if it's a, off the field type thing, whatever happened, but he's not going to be out there. So it looks like JaMycal Hasty is going to get, am I breaking up again? You're smirking.
You're not breaking up. I'm not going to lie. I think it's a typo. It's supposed to be third back.
Oh, okay. Well,
you killed that though. You absolutely crushed that.
It's the same. It's kind of the same. It's the same thing, I think. And I think the Antonio Gibson thing adds a little bit of a wrinkle to it because if he's not out there for the next, week or two, JaMycal Hasty can come in here, play really well, and then you might not even need, not that you're not going to need Antonio Gibson, but he can kind of overtake him on the depth chart, and then he becomes that third running back de facto, right? If Gibson's not here, Hasty plays well. Hasty's the third back when Gibson comes back. Like it's kind of all the same thing. And I know, maybe it's a typo, but it all makes sense. It makes sense because Ramondre is the bell cow. So what thoughts on the running back and room in a whole? And my question too is that I'm going to add into this. Are they going to need to go to the free agent market and maybe kind of go get one of these guys that's struggling out there because now Gibson isn't going to be out there and Hasty is sort of an unknown?
Excellent ad-libs, my friend, first of all. But I think that Antonio Gibson, I know he's on NFI. I don't want to, make that a big deal until we know what exactly it is.
Of course.
Could be a short-term thing, whatever. But if he were to miss time, I think JaMycal Hasty would be the most logical third choice. And this is why training camp is so important for this position, especially because it's really hard for running backs to show anything when there's no pads on. JaMycal Hasty stood out because he made some catches, but guys like Deshaun Fenwick and Kevin Harris, they're really going to stand out when they actually get to put the pads on and start hitting guys because they're more physical backs. I think it's too soon to say that they have to hit the free agent market because, Kevin Harris, you already know he's solid, maybe more of a practice squad / roster guy where you move him around where you need to, but he's fine. And I do like Deshaun Fenwick, a guy who's on the older side but doesn't have a lot of tread on his tires, has, I think, some 3-down versatility. So I don't think they necessarily need to start looking for free agents until kind of like cornerback. We see what the young guys look like, whether anybody separates themselves. And if not, there's probably going to be some veterans hanging around. But yeah, my money's on Deshaun Fenwick because I really liked what he showed in college. We know what Kevin Harris is. JaMycal Hasty's also been in the league for a while. I don't know how much more he has to show. He's like a solid change of pace receiving back. But Deshaun Fenwick is my guy. Watch out for him.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit this offseason when we did our depth projection piece on the running backs here on Pat's Daily, where Yeah, Hasty was great in the offseason program, but there's also no pads, so you don't really get to see that banger type running back as a runner. It's basically just a passing camp. So yeah, he looked great, but when the pads come on and when they're not just running flare routes all day in a passing camp, then that kind of changes the depth chart out. Obviously, Gibson being absent, we don't know how long. You're right, but that's going to add a little wrinkle to it. So running back is certainly one to watch, and one where I could see them potentially, like last year when they went and got a Zeke Elliott, they could go for, a 1-year rental on a player. I don't know if it's going to be a guy like Leonard Fournette. I know he's worked out here a lot in the past, but he's on the older side. Ramondre is going to take over a majority of the reps there. So we'll see how it all plays out. But let's move on to receiver. Obviously, a ton of young players, guys that they drafted this year in Jalen Polk, Javon Baker, Kendrick Bourne returns from the ACL, KJ Osborne signed. Gerard Mayo talked yesterday. They're going to kind of mix and match these guys. There's going to be a depth chart, but it's not going to be one group of older guys and then bring all the young guys in for the next round of reps. Like, it's kind of going to be a mix and match type thing. So how soon do you see these guys overtaking the veterans? I will add, and I'll kind of throw my bold prediction in here that just got posted on the channel earlier, where I think a guy like Jalen Polk is almost immediately in that mix. I don't even think he has to leapfrog. I think he's firmly there. He had a great start. They spent the 37th overall pick on him. I think my bold prediction is that he's going to go for over 1,000 yards. So I think he's cemented in there, but you tell me what you think. And then a guy like Javon Baker, what's it going to take for him to truly get into the mix with those veterans, an everyday player for this?
Yeah. One thing I do want to address quickly in the chat, somebody put it in, and I think this is worth bringing up. Demetric Felton, just quickly going back to the running backs, they did work out Demetric Felton. He was somebody who played for the Browns, was more of a special teamer, though. So when I say they're not going to hit free agency, I don't think they're going to look for a free agent that's actually going to end up competing. I think with Terrell Jennings obviously starting the season, I think it's is it on the PUP list or the NFI list? It's
one of the two.
One of the two. He's on one of the injury lists, so he may not be available. So if they do sign a running back, I do think it's just going to kind of be as a body. But for these young players, so actually asked Gerard Mayo yesterday how he sees the balance between giving the young guys opportunities, knowing they're going to make some mistakes, and then having the veterans who can obviously keep things smoother because they know what's expected and usually pick things up faster. He mentioned because they know what they have in the veterans pretty much, there's always still evaluations going on, but these young guys will get opportunities. And that's where I think Jalen Polk, obviously, I feel like he has the clearest path because he's got the run blocking better than a lot of those guys at that Z competition. And he's got such great hands, and he stood out the most among the receivers. And then Javon Baker didn't play a lot, only really one practice in the spring, but was sensational. And then Kayshon Boutte also stood out towards the end. So I think when these guys get their opportunities, Jacoby Brissett, Drake May, they're going to give them opportunities to test tight windows and make big plays. They just have to capitalize. And you look at KJ Osborne, Tyquan Thornton, Jalen Reagor, I just don't see them as the kind of guys that consistently make those sorts of plays. Like KJ Osborne lived over the middle when he was with the Vikings. Tyquan Thornton hasn't shown us anything to believe that he's really going to take that step forward. Hoping it happens, but we haven't seen it. And Jalen Reagor, another veteran where he pretty much is what he is. He'll catch some deep passes. He'll make some plays with the ball in his hands, but he's not really a reliable receiver. So hopefully it happens towards the end of training camp, maybe earlier, obviously. But I'd like to see these young guys really get an opportunity because I think the big play threats are going to come from him more than they're going to come from any of these older guys.
Yeah, for sure. All right, tight end. Hunter Henry, cemented, obviously. Captain, 3-year deal. He's gonna be the guy. But then in the second slot, it's Jaheim Bell, who they drafted in the 7th round, and then it's Austin Hooper, who comes in with familiarity with this system, obviously having played with Alex Van Pelt in Cleveland a couple years ago. What are your thoughts on the second spot here? Again, is it the young kid? Is it Hooper's familiarity? Do they keep 3 tight ends? They've kept only 2 tight ends for the last 3 or 4 years with Henry and Jonnu, and then now Henry and Gesicki. They haven't really kept a third one around. So is it changed this year? And who's going to be the second guy on the depth chart?
I think it changes this year because Alex Van Pelt with the Browns loved multiple tight end sets. They'd have 3 tight ends on the field at once sometimes. Sometimes those would be linemen, but I do think they're going to want more depth. I think it's going to end up being more of a committee type situation with Austin Hooper and Jaheim Bell, with Hooper being maybe the more reliable kind of blocking tight end inline guy, and Jaheim Bell being more of the move tight end, the gadget guy, someone you want to get the ball in his hands and use him as a receiver. Now, LaMichael Petway is an interesting candidate here. None of us were really talking about him going into minicamp and OTAs, but he did make some impressive plays, although he wasn't consistent. And then Mitchell Wilcox was involved. He didn't really make any plays that stood out to me personally, and I think another veteran where you see him in the league, he doesn't really give you many spectacular plays, more of a depth guy. So I think Austin Hooper is going to be that veteran who mixes in, but I'm hoping, like the receivers, Jaheim Bell can establish himself and make some big plays as a receiver because he brings juice to that tight end core they don't really have anywhere else. So, but still, that second spot, I think it's going to probably be more like personnel based than anything. But again, hopefully Jaheim Bell can seize as many opportunities as possible because that dude has the opportunity to be a stud.
It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. You're right. I think it ultimately comes down to, again, personnel. Like, I think it's Henry in the one spot, and then they're going to keep three. I think you're right. I think the change of system, the change of, personnel ideology, if you will, with, a new front office and a new coaching staff, keep three. Henry's your guy and use the other two personnel wise. But I'm curious to see kind of how often each guy emerges and who ends up, again, what set of personnel they use more often, and if it's more Hooper, if it's more Jaheim Bell, or how that goes. All right, one of the most important position groups on the field for the Patriots is offensive line, and specifically offensive tackle. Taylor, what's your top question heading into camp about what's going to happen with the offensive line? Or offensive tackle, rather.
Whether the offensive tackle is going to hold up is really the biggest thing. I feel more confident about the interior. We'll talk about them in a second, but really, Chooks on the left side specifically and Caden Wallace are pretty huge unknowns. Now, we spoke to Brandon Thorne on Pat's Daily a couple weeks back, and he mentioned that Chooks is really only an average starter at right tackle, and he may be worse at left tackle. But we've also heard that inside the building, they like Chooks. And he's only 26. There's a lot of faith in Scott Peters and what he can do after coming from the Browns and his experience in this specific system. And the scheme should protect these guys a decent amount as well. They shouldn't be left on islands very often, or they're just fighting for their lives out there. So I want to see more from Chooks once things get more competitive to see if he really can, because he's an aggressive guy, but sometimes that bites him. So to see whether or not Scott Peters can maybe minimize some of the aggressiveness that kind of worked against him. And then Caden Wallace is an older guy with a lot of experience, and now he doesn't have to kind of be thrown into the fire with his first NFL snaps being on the left side because he was a right tackle towards the end of minicamp. So I'm hoping and more hopeful for Caden Wallace on the right side, honestly, because he's older, has the experience, and is really physical and powerful. Chooks more, again, he played left tackle in college, but hasn't done it in the pros. I just want to see how well he holds up. I have faith, but these are serious question marks that I understand people are like, how's the offense going to look? The tackle position is kind of scary.
Right. I mean, my question too is like, do they start Onwenu there again? Because that's what they did in the beginning of the offseason program is Onwenu was the right tackle at first, and then they flipped him inside and added Caden Wallace to the outside. Now, what have they uncovered? What have they schemed up over these last couple of weeks off the field? And where do they think, Mayo talked about it. What's their best combination of their, that true top five? Is it Mike Onwenu at right tackle? Is it, a Nick Leverett on the inside? Or is Leverett already kind of, not already, but is he backed off into the, that second group, and does Onwenu start at guard? So we'll see what happens there. But speaking of Onwenu at guard, interior offensive line. I know that that's not really your question, but what is your top question for the interior offensive line heading into training camp?
Got my timing down on these. All right. My question is, will City So make a year two jump? Now, this is the big question mark, like I mentioned, on the inside. David Andrews, solid as they come. Mike Onwenu, Pro Bowl caliber guard. Honestly, seeing him finally end up there with Caden Wallace at right, I'm like, okay, I like this vision. That part of the offensive line, you're okay. City So was an excellent run blocker last year. A lot of that had to do with working in tandem with Mike Onwenu. He was PFF's highest graded rookie offensive lineman in terms of run blocking, but he wasn't great in pass protection. Now, we did have some highlights for sure. His performance against Deron Payne of the Commanders was probably his best performance, I think, but he did struggle on an island against more athletic interior rushers or guys who usually play on the edge but kicked inside. Now, at left guard, especially with Onwenu on the right side, he's going to have more help, and that should definitely kind of help with his margin for error and his learning curve. But smart defensive coordinators in obvious passing situations are going to find ways to put him on an island. He's got to hold up or at least be solid. He doesn't have to be extraordinary like a Joe Tooney, but he can't be giving up quick pressures in those situations where he just has ugly losses. So if he can do that, I have a lot more faith in this interior. In the run game, I think they're going to be really good, really physical, especially I feel like Van Pelt will lean into the downhill stuff where they can be at their best. And I think he's athletic enough for the outside zone stuff that's probably going to go more to the left side anyway. But the pass protection has to be consistent for him to be a guy where you're like, okay, City, possibly a long-term answer at the left guard spot, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think my top question there too, just to add on to the Onwenu storyline, is does he live up to the price tag? Because they paid him a lot of money. And yes, guards are making a ton of money. We talked about that. Kevin Dodson with the Rams and a couple other guys, like big price tags on the interior, usually, saved for the outside. But Onwenu gets that what's it, 20 something million per year. I forget the numbers on his entire extension, but he's getting a hefty check. So if they move him inside, is he that Pro Bowl, all pro caliber player? Or does he just, play okay football and it kind of feels like an overpay? And again, I think he's great. I think it's going to work out, but you don't know. You paid him. They paid him. They said he was going to be a tackle. Now he's a guard. We'll see how it plays out. Does he end up, buying that? Does he end up fulfilling the price tag that they gave him?
I think he's better at guard. So honestly, like with that, and he's a top 5 guard or like a top 5 or 6 guard now with Quinn Minor to the Broncos getting paid. And I think he's paid like a top 5 right tackle. I think your better values with him at guard. I think he's paid fine. Just my opinion.
Right. No, I feel you. I wonder. Not that I wonder, but I want to see it play out. I want them to justify the price tag to have it in the guard. All right. That's the offense. We're going to move on to all our questions for the defense in a second. But first, a quick word from our friends over at Game Time. We'll be right back. It's the dog days of summer here in Boston, which means it's time to get to some games over at Fenway Park. This baseball season, I'm using Game Time to land my Red Sox tickets. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace in Major League Baseball, which means getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. It's super easy. You just open the app, click Sports, and the games will be right there for you. Right now, you can get tickets to the Rollin' Red Sox for as low as $11. You can even buy parking for the game and check out your seat view right in the app. With Game Time, you can save up to 60% by buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy shows, theaters, and more. Get the lowest price guaranteed, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Realize I was on Game Time reading anymore. That was kind of cringy, but here we go. Let's do. I know, right? All right, let's fly through these because we got to get down to training camp. It's probably already filling up down there, so we got to quickly get out of here. But let's do interior defensive line. Taylor, what's your top question for the IDLs?
Who's going to step up for Devon Gottschall if he does end up holding in? We saw him at camp, but he wasn't participating. There were reports today from Jashina Anderson that Matthew Judon plans to participate, and he mentioned he didn't like that he was holding in last year. Now it's Devon Gottschall's turn. Now, Gerard Mayo said all the right things. The relationships are still good. They want to do everything possible to keep these guys. But Devon Gottschall is the guy who seems like he could be the odd man out. With this team saying they want an improved pass rush, Jeremiah Farms is somebody I'm pretty high on relative to the role he's going to play as more of an early down defensive tackle because he's more stout than you'd expect as an interior defensive lineman. He's a bit undersized, but still held his ground well, got off blocks, somebody who really didn't make any glaring mistakes when he was used in a rotational role last year, but also gave you legit pass rush upside. He's really good with his hands, and he's got some juice in that area. I could see him maybe stepping up, and if Devon Gottschall ends up getting traded or something, maybe taking over as the primary guy. And obviously Daniel Equale, a little bit smaller than Farms and Gottschall. Like neither one of Farms or Equale are the big space eaters that Gottschall is, but Equale still also holds his ground, a little easier to move, but not, he's not a liability necessarily. Right. And as most people know, he gives you pass rush upside. So my money's on Farms. I think Equale is probably the veteran who's going to get the best opportunity. But man, I just look under my name on Twitter and put Jeremiah Farms, and you'll see he puts up really good tape in like the last month and a half of the season. Yeah. So watch out for him. But I think somebody's got you because I just don't feel super confident about this Gottschall situation long term.
I'll throw in does Christian Barmore fill his contract? Does he what's the word I'm looking for? Does he fulfill that the big contract that he that he did? Because he obviously gets paid a ton. He's played well. There's no question that like he's not a great player, but sometimes guys get paid and the performance goes down. So I'm curious to see if Barmore shakes out and stays dominant on the inside for them, because that guy's such a beast. And I'm excited to see him sort of another year fully healthy. 2 years ago, he was hurt a little bit. Now he comes in, gets his money, let's wreak havoc on the inside. I'm excited to see Barmore, but it's obviously a question mark. All right, edge. Taylor, what do you got on the edge? What's your big question there?
Another year 2 leap candidate, Keion White. This is a big one. Gerard Mayo mentioned he took a step forward as a leader. He's been really vocal in meetings. Seems more like a guy who would lead by example. So it's really cool. It kind of feels like a reflection of how much he wants to get better and really is involved in this team. Is a really quiet guy, is someone who really is taking charge in that way. And on top of that, man, his film from last year at times was dominant. Like Christian Barmore type plays, you were like, damn, he's really just blowing up double teams, getting clean wins against quality offensive linemen. But he's got to be consistent. He's got to play under control. I think the jump in competition was pretty obvious for most of last season, but he started to figure it out towards the end, where a lot of the close plays that he had earlier in the season, he was actually finishing and starting to pile up some stats. If he can be that more consistent every down type player like a Christian Barmore or a Matthew Judon, this front gets a lot better. Because again, I have confidence that something will get done with Judon. So having him, Barmore, and Keion White on the field at the same time gives you a lot of versatility, pass rush upside, and run defense. So I really want to see if he can take advantage of this opportunity, or potentially also move Dietrich Wise to more of a rotational backup role, like we saw towards the end of last season, where at first White was more of Dietrich Wise's backup and they would kind of come in and out. But then you started to see that Keion White was on the field first. So if he can build on that, this should be an exciting front.
Yeah, for sure. I'll add the another obvious one here. Does something get done with Matthew Judon? I mean, it was reported by Josina Anderson this morning that he is going to participate, though he does want to see a bump in contract. But it also feels like if they don't get something done, he's just going to play. So, I mean, that's the holdout is to kind of give yourself some leverage. But again, he doesn't want to do that. He said that multiple times this offseason. So hopefully they get something done. But that's sort of the overarching question in the room as well is if they can get Matthew Judon to pay a bump or potentially an extension over the next few years. All right, linebacker, Taylor. Sione Takitaki, I know that's your question. He's a guy who went on the PUP list. Yesterday, he was dealing with an offseason injury. I believe Mike Reese reported last night that he had some sort of scope done. But he should be back out there at some point. I'll obviously Jelani Tavai's in that room as well. But what are you curious about with Sione Takitaki heading into 2024?
I want to know how they're going to use him on defense. I think he will have a significant role on special teams, but he signed a 2-year deal. So it feels like they really do have a plan for him. He's going to be competing for backup spots with Raekwon McMillan, who the team obviously loves, 2 significant injuries, and he signed immediately both times. But Takitaki was an every down player for the Browns. First down, second down, third down, and then special teams as well. And with Marte Mapu seeming like he was kind of in line to take over that third down linebacker role from Mac Wilson from last season, I don't think as much as a pass rusher, but more in terms of an off-ball linebacker. Is Takitaki going to be the first guy on early downs when Jawan Bentley or Jelani Tavai aren't on the field? We saw Bentley miss a little bit of time last season. Maybe they want somebody with a little more athleticism than Bentley in some certain situations, because again, it seems like they do want to get more explosive on the defensive side of the ball, even though Jawan Bentley, I think, is solid in coverage and does what he needs to not be a liability. So yeah, I just want to know, is Takitaki going to be the coverage guy and involved in that package? Is he just going to be more of a rotational guy with Tavai, who just got extended, and Jawan Bentley, who's here for the long term? I'm not sure where exactly he fits in, but LA Wolf loves him, so he's going to get playing time. Maybe he keeps the other guys fresh. I'm not sure, but once he gets on the field, it's going to be exciting to see how he does fit.
I guess one big question I have for the entire team then is, do they fulfill the contracts they signed this offseason? Because they had the money to burn. They extended a lot of guys. They did their draft and development. Jelani Tavai is another one where he gets a 3-year deal, $5 million base. I think it can go to 7 each year. Confirm they play the song Taki Taki. Are you reading the comments?
Yeah. Pretty good. If they do, every single reporter is going to say something. So trust me, you'll find out.
But yeah, I hope Tavai. contract as well, because they did, people say they didn't spend money this offseason. They obviously did. They just didn't spend it in ways some people wanted to, like a Calvin Ridley or, go get Brandon Ayuk, which I still think they should do, but that's a question. That's a conversation for another day. But does Tavai continue his upward trajectory and fulfill the contract he signed as well? That's my big question. All right, let's move on to cornerback, Taylor. What are you looking to get answered with cornerback this training camp?
Same thing everybody wants answered. Who's going to be the third cornerback? Now, Christian Gonzalez obviously balled out in the first month, got hurt. But I think everybody who
he's number one.
Watched his tape understands he's going to be a stud as long as, there's no setbacks. Then Jonathan Jones. He was asked yesterday where he, feels most comfortable playing or something like that.
Yeah.
And he's a versatile guy. He really didn't give an answer. It's wherever they need me to play. And that's because if Alex Austin or, maybe even Marco Wilson, they've kind of been in a battle since the spring. Whichever one of those guys emerges, if the Patriots say, hey, they're our third best corner, then Jonathan Jones probably kicks inside to be the slot guy in those three cornerback looks. But if it's Marcus Jones who finally emerges and is an outstanding slot corner, and Gerard Mayo hinted, probably John Jones and Marcus Jones battling for that slot corner spot. Right. If he stands out, then Jonathan Jones is outside. Now, I really don't know. Isaiah Bolden could also be in the mix as somebody who is seen as more of a perimeter corner, but played in the slot during the spring because Marcus and Jonathan Jones were hurt. So I want to know which of those guys can seize an opportunity, because that'll give you a better idea of the outlook for this Patriots defensive backfield. Right. I would like Marcus Jones to emerge because I think he's perfect for that slot cornerback position. And I think Jonathan Jones is better outside than he gets credit for, especially as an older player. I wonder how good he still is in the slot. But Alex Austin also showed he could potentially be a playmaker. So we'll see. But I like the young talent they've got to potentially take on those roles. But if nobody emerges, maybe, Stephon Gilmore towards the end of the summer. Who knows?
Right. We'll see what happens there. It's kind of, I like how, not that I like, but it's interesting how John Jones's position just it doesn't rely on his own play. It's just, hey, wherever we need you, you're going to go. And so it is funny how it's the third corner spot that ultimately decides where the second cornerback is going to play. If he plays great at outside or great in the slot, it doesn't matter because they know that he can play both. And it's just a matter of if the guy on the outside or the guy on the inside, where that shapes up. But
I think they rotate as well. I feel like that was what we saw in week 1 last year. We saw Jonathan Jones, Marcus Jones in the slot, Miles Bryant. They were letting everybody play. I think that was because John Jones was hurt. I think he missed the next few games. But yeah, regardless, I think there's going to be a rotation, but somebody's kind of, got to rise to the top ideally.
Yeah, for sure. All right, safety. Taylor, what's the biggest question mark at the safety position?
Marte Mapu, my guy. Can he emerge as the third safety? It looked like Jalen Hawkins was kind of the big nickel safety. So when they wanted more beef in their sub packages, they would have Jabril Peppers or Kyle Duggar down in the slot with whichever one of those two wasn't in the slot in the backfield. But then free safety, you saw all of them back there. And that's one of their harder packages to decipher is going to be Duggar, is it Peppers, is it Mapu at free safety? We really saw Jalen Hawkins in that role as the center fielder during the spring, and Marte Mapu is more of a dime linebacker. Now, I think the more snaps from Marte Mapu, the better. I think it'd be a disappointment if Jalen Hawkins ended up playing over him. I think they just gave him so much to do as a rookie, pretty much from the jump, that he seemed like he was just overwhelmed at times, but he has the athleticism. I think he has the intelligence, and we saw the playmaking ability between him baiting Mahomes into an interception, forcing a fumble that helped them win against the Broncos on special teams. I think this is a guy that you want on the field because of his athleticism and his versatility. So he needs to claim that third spot because Jalen Hawkins, solid player, was in the Deron Harmon role for the Falcons. But I mean, Marte Mapu is one of the guys that I think could potentially be a cornerstone for this defense. If they are 3 deep at that position in this scheme, I just think that'd be huge. So I want to see him lock that spot up this summer.
All right. My question, can Kyle Duggar fulfill his contract? Shocker. It's a contract question. We'll see what happens there. All right. We got to wrap it up, Taylor. Quickly, special teams. What's your big question on special teams? I think it's everybody's big question, but the floor is yours.
Yeah, Chad Ryan. We talked about it ad nauseum at this point. I feel like I'm, bullying the poor guy, but his field goals, he missed some, unlike oh my God, I keep saying Joey Sly. I don't know why Jesse Bates just wouldn't get out of my head. But he made all of his field goals, whereas Chad Ryan, even the ones he missed, some of them were pretty off. So I just want to see him be more consistent and prove that they didn't potentially waste a decent pick in him last season. And again, we all root for Chad. He seems like a great guy, but you got to prove it on the field. So hopefully he can close the gap that we saw that was pretty significant and, make the field goals, make them convincingly, and secure himself a roster spot.
Yep. All right. Two things I'll quickly add there before we get out of here is number one, how the Patriots react and adapt to the new kickoff rules. Who will be that kickoff guy? If Ryland could potentially emerge as, the kicker they keep if he's better at that kind of stuff than a guy like Joey Slide. Does Bryce Behringer kick off? That'll be interesting. And the other thing is return man, punts and kicks. Does Marcus Jones stay healthy enough to be that all-pro punt returner again? Does Jalen Reagor earn himself a spot as a kick returner, like a roster spot? Or does a guy like Isaiah Bolden, who was awesome at kick return, college, one of the best in the NCAA a couple years ago, does he emerge in that role? Do they use the young guys in Polk and Baker? It'll be interesting to see the rest of the special teams. I leave special teams to our guys over at Pat's Beat in Brian and Barth, but that's one I'm kind of keeping my eye on it here. Yeah, exactly. All right. That's going to do it. That's our preview. We're heading down to Foxborough right now, so make sure you follow along with us on Twitter at Mike Kadlick, at TKyles39, and at Patriots CLNS on Twitter. We're going to be down there with live updates. And then make sure you subscribe to the channel here, Patriots Press Pass, because we will be live after practice for a training camp live recap, myself and Taylor. Hopefully have some guests on as well. So make sure you lock in. A reminder, we are powered by Game Time. Head over to Game Time, use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Until this afternoon, thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And we'll talk to you soon. See you guys.